All right. Hey, Rahim. Thanks
Hey,
so much for
Felipe.
joining. We have been exchanging emails for forever. You've been like one of the most helpful parents I've ever met, and like your insight into EdTech and education and our product and everything has been amazing. And we've been meaning to chat for forever. So then we
Yeah.
decided, hey, I'm starting this podcast, so let's just have the conversation and record it. So like I didn't actually know that much about your career and kind of like your journey until recently when I was like preparing for this. I can't believe you lived in London, like your career has been through London, Beijing, San Francisco. You're the founder of multiple impressive companies. You've been an executive at various companies, including COO at Yep Math Tutoring when you guys got acquired. You have experience at Amazon and Google. You're technical, but you're also like very, very much a product veteran. You also have knowledge and experience and are an expert in finance and data science. Your education is Oxford University. Very cool. I mean, I think for like somebody who's watching this, immediately they're like, okay, wow, he probably has something to share. But the thing I'll add on is that even before I knew those things, you've always been like the most thoughtful, the most insightful. Anyway, I'm super, super excited to talk to you. Let's jump right in.
Same. Likewise. I'm excited to talk to you.
Amazing. Okay, so one thing that, I mean, the reason I'm so passionate about education, the reason I do what I do stems from my educational experience and, you know, how I was raised. I also lived in various countries and et cetera, et cetera. So in my opinion, and maybe this is not true for everybody, but in my opinion, your own educational experience shapes how you approach education in general, your ideas of education, and how you approach parenting from an educational perspective. So I would just love to start there. Like, where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? Just give us your full
Okay.
story,
Yeah.
please.
So I was born and grew up in Balham in South London, and I went to a state school, like a government school from when I was 5 till 11. So that's primary school in the UK. It's like 6 years, and then we moved to a different area, and I'll come back to what that school was like. But we moved to a different area of London, like near Wimbledon, where they had a different system, where it was rather than primary and secondary, they had like primary, middle, and secondary. So then I joined this middle school in the third year of that school. So these kids had been together for a couple of years. I was only at that school for 2/3 of the year, and then I switched to another school, and I'll tell you about that. So the primary school, very ordinary experience. People from mostly people from the neighborhood, all people from the neighborhood actually, and they were mix of races, mix of backgrounds, mix of parental wealth, and mix of academic ability. The teachers there were like really kind. I was, just really, I feel so fortunate that I had those teachers and how they treated me. And I remember even like one year being given some workbooks that I could do at home because like the teacher knew that I was not being challenged in math. So she said, okay, just take these Fletcher math books and then just work through them and put the answers in. And there's one teacher I particularly remember at that school, Miss Sinclair, who was known to be the most strict teacher in the school, and people didn't want to be in her class, and I loved being in her class. And so when I went to this other school near Wimbledon, what I was shocked by was there was this no discipline. There were just like people. There were only 2 kids in the class that were trying to pay attention and trying to do the work that we were being asked to do in the class, let alone homework. And both of us were new, and the others were just like varying degrees of messing around, from like being disruptive to others to just not paying attention, like on that spectrum. And I got bullied a little bit at that school as well. Probably, I don't know, maybe because I'm not very nice, and also because like I was paying attention in class. Like probably a combination of those two things. I didn't have great like interpersonal skills. And then my parents then thought about what should we do, and can we put you in another school? And my uncle knew about this scheme the government had at the time called the Assisted Places Scheme, where it was means tested, and my family did not have money, like either income or wealth, and it was means tested and ability tested. So then I took a test at this school, Dulwich College, which is a big like private school in London, and got in. And then I was able to go to that school from when I was just before I turned 12 to when I was 18 and finished school. So I was extremely fortunate. So the first thing that struck me like when I got there was that how everyone was like prepared, and they knew stuff. Like one of my earliest memories of that school was we had a geography test, and we were given a blank map of not a blank map, but a map with the outlines of Europe, and asked to fill in the countries. And I think I got like 3 of them, like, or 4 of them maybe. And I was like by far the worst in the class at this. Like no one did even close to like that badly on the test. And we were studying Latin, and I had to catch up because I hadn't studied Latin before. So I had to have that was the only time in my life I actually had some private tutoring, was to catch up in Latin so I could just get to the grade level for Latin. I've never had any like tutoring apart from that. And it was like the school said basically like, you're going to have to pay for tutoring because you're not going to be able to catch up otherwise. And so my parents made a sacrifice and were able to pay for that. But like, yeah, these kids, a lot of them had been in good schools from when they started schooling, and probably had, outside tutors and whatever. So they knew a lot more than I did. But I was smart enough, so I was able to catch up. And then the following year, I was put we were streamed. So there were 3 streams. So there were 6 classes in the second year, 2A through to 2F, and I was in 2A, which was like the 2A and 2B were the top stream. And so I was around kids that were about my ability level, right? So I wasn't, and I wasn't the bottom of the class, I wasn't top of the class, I was somewhere in the middle, and it was great because everything was pitched roughly to my level for most subjects, not everything. And that continued throughout the whole rest of my time at that school. So I'm a big believer in ability grouping because I think it works for everybody. It doesn't make sense for like people who are not ready for something to be taught it, and it doesn't make sense for someone who already knows something to be taught that thing.
Wow, what an experience. What were the like emotions? I mean, you mentioned you got bullied a little bit. You kind of felt like a fish out of. What was it like going to this new school? I mean, obviously a little bit maybe like scary that everybody knows things that you don't know, but did you feel much more at home? Or
I felt totally at home. I don't recall feeling, it might have been an adjustment period of a week or two, whatever, but I felt totally at home. Like everyone, like people were generally nice to me, and there was no issue, and the teachers were helpful. I could easily get questions answered. The teachers cared about subjects. So I don't recall the time when I felt uncomfortable or like, I don't remember there being an adjustment period or stress from that.
Mainly just relief.
Yeah. Wow. And it was interesting. Like we were learning cool stuff, right?
Was there anything that you like? Were there any like early hobbies or rabbit holes or projects or things like when you were younger that now looking back at them, now that you can connect the dots, you were like, oh wow, that was actually like kind of pivotal.
I think there are a couple. One is, and I just thought of it just now as you were talking about it, was that when I was really little, my dad gave me a little bulb and a piece of wire and a battery that you could just, and it got me curious about how does this flashlight work, and then I open up a flashlight and it's like, it's basically the same thing with some structure to it, right? And so I always enjoyed playing around with things like that, and I enjoyed trying, like obviously like other kids playing with Legos, but I had like maybe 30 pieces of Legos, so there was a limit to maybe 40. There wasn't many, so I couldn't do a lot of things with it, but I always liked to like see how things worked. And I remember there was a teacher at school, Mrs. Heinrich. I don't know how you pronounce it exactly, but when I was in the first year, she had a box of like broken clocks or old alarm clocks or something, and she let me take one home just to kind of like take it apart and look at it. So I liked things like that when I was a kid. But I think the pivotal thing was like when I was around 10, so there's a computer that was very popular in the UK called the BBC Micro, which is based on the 6502 processor, which is the same one that is in the Apple II.
Okay.
Made by MOS Technologies. Anyway, so that computer had a little brother, which was cheaper, called the Acorn Electron. And around 1985, they cut the price of it and they started selling it in bundles because they were just trying to get rid of the extra stock. And my dad bought me this computer, and it was a lot of money at the time. I remember it was $129.99, which for my parents was a lot of money to spend on something. But they bought me this computer, and then I was like, oh, hang on, I need another £20 to buy a tape deck that I can load and save things onto it. And then I just used to sit every day in front of the TV, and just like type in programs from a book or try to like read things. And I was like, from that book, there was a book by this guy called Masood Yazdani. I still remember the name, like, cause it was like, wow. It was about programming the electron, and it came free with the bundle. So there was that book, and there was the user guide, and I used those to learn how to learn some rudimentary programming. And I loved doing it. And then sometimes I bought magazines like with stuff, and I type things in and I try and experiment. And that really got me into the idea that computers are cool and I can like make stuff. But it wasn't like, the story does not continue in the way that you expect. Like I didn't then become like, oh, I'm into coding and I get better and better and better. And I think part of it was I had no peer group, and I had no one to learn from. So I could only learn what I had in the book. And I remember there was like this thing, there were some things on the Electron that you couldn't do with the built-in like basic programming language. So you had to write assembly to do it. And there was a reference at that time, because it came with the book, it had a reference of like how to do this particular thing with assembly. And it said in there like, do blah, 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 blah. And then the number has to be represented in 2's complement. And I'm like, I don't know what 2's complement is. What do I do? And I had no idea like who to ask. So there was a a thing at the time called teletext on TV in the UK, where you press a text button and it would show this thing, and you could press a page number, it would go to a number. And there was one of the pages on there was like about computers, and they had a thing where you could write letters to them, and they would like answer some of the letters on there on the teletext page. So I wrote a letter, a physical letter, put a stamp on it, sent it, and then like a couple of weeks later, I was browsing that page as I did like every day, and I saw that they'd answered my question. So that was like, to give you an example about how I was learning about technology. So it wasn't like now where you can just Google stuff or even like, go on ChatGPT. So I didn't, and I think partly I didn't have like motivation of things I wanted to build either. So I didn't really continue that, but I had sporadically, like over time, interest in computers as well. And then that started again, like when I got to university.
Wow. Yeah, it's crazy to think. I think about this a lot, like, because there were a lot of things that I wanted to learn about or do or tinker with, but it was just like, there were different times where you couldn't just like open up YouTube or ChatGPT window and just have a conversation about it and see how feasible it is. Like felt like there were so many things that were so far away from us, like so inaccessible, both from like a financial perspective and different life circumstances, but also just from like okay, well, the library is only open at certain days, certain hours, and you can only go to it to like figure out specific problems. I wonder what the students, what the kids are going to be like in 20, 30 years, just having grown up with ChatGPT and Google and all these things all throughout, like just being able to watch an in-depth YouTube video and any tutorial about anything they want. It's going to be fascinating.
Yeah, for sure. I worry a little bit. Like I wonder like if they're going to not have the same kind of ability to get information from other sources. Because if you can always get the answer to your specific question through ChatGPT or Google's AI answers or something, then how are you going to learn to get answers to hard things that ChatGPT can't tell you? Where you might have to read like 3 books to figure out, like get some mental model of how it works.
Yeah, exactly. Like the creative part of solving problems, or like the grit part, like you having to send out this letter to this community, that like, that, I don't know, that's like, those are like important moments versus like if you just ask ChatGPT, you might have gotten the same answer, but it's a completely different experience. It kind of shapes who you are.
And I know when I use ChatGPT, often, like sometimes the answer it gives me, I know there's something wrong about the answer. And it could be trivial stuff. Like today I was Googling I was asking ChatGPT about what kind of doorbell do I need if I'm going to get a Ring doorbell and connect it to this type of thing. And one of the bits of information it gave me, I knew was wrong. It didn't make sense.
Right.
But how I only knew that because I've had some interest in the thing, and I knew something about electronics.
Yeah. What's that like phenomenon about the news where like if you read the news about things that you're like an expert on, you realize it's completely wrong, and then like
Gell-Mann like, amnesia.
Exactly, that's the one. Yeah, it's a little bit like that with ChatGPT. It's like, you're like, wow, it's so intelligent until you ask it about things that you know these specifics.
Exactly.
Cool. Let's talk about Rami. So Rami obviously is your son. I've had the like amazing privilege to get to know him, to get to spend time with him. He's like an amazing kid. You told me he just turned 9. I thought he was already 10 because he's so like mature and intelligent. What? Like, okay, so we talked about your story. How has that shaped your values, your goals with regards to Rami's education? What are the things that you are like doing for him that you wish you had? How do you think about education given your experience
so I'll tell you,
Rami?
So when you talk about my experience and his, the biggest thing that for me is the biggest 2 things I think are study skills and math. And I'll tell you how like why I think about that is when I went to Dulwich, that school that I mentioned, I was good at picking up math. I did, there was a lot of homework every day. Like we had 3 pieces of homework every day, except for Friday when we had 4 pieces, and each one was, I think in the first year, so when we were 11, it was 11 or 12, it was like 20 minutes per piece, so 1 hour total per day, and then it increased every year, and by the end it was 3 hours. It was, I think, 45 minutes times 3. Or maybe 3 hours on the weekday, and then 4 hours on the weekend. And so we had a lot of so we had homework. So I was able to do okay just by following instructions, right? Like we had good teachers, so they were good at running the lessons and having us doing a mix of instruction and then giving us exercises, and they gave us good exercises to do as homework. So as long as I did the things I was asked to do, I was able to do well. So I did not struggle at all in math. Some of the other subjects where I didn't find them interesting, where I didn't properly do the homework, like things like history, I didn't do well in, but I did well in my GCSEs, and then because of that I was able to get into Oxford because you get the admission decision before you finish your A levels. So like, sorry, for people that are listening that don't know, is like there are exams you do in the UK when you're 16 called GCSEs, and then you do more when you're 18, they're called A levels. So each of those is like a 2-year course, people tend to do around 10-ish GCSEs and 3 to 5 A-levels. And so I did well in my GCSEs, and then I got my offer from Oxford, and off the back of that, and then my predicted A-level grades and the interview and the entrance exam. But I found the last 2 years of school really hard, or the last year actually really hard, because math suddenly got much, much harder, and I couldn't just like fill in knowledge that I didn't have by working from first principles. Whereas usually if I came across a question in math that I didn't understand, I could always just work out the next thing from just what I already knew. And then we're doing things in maths like integration by parts or integration in general, right? You can't just work it out. You have to remember these rules, because otherwise you're not going to go to, you see something and it's like, oh, you don't even know how to start decomposing it. And I hadn't had the habit of like, okay, I'm going to have to study and I'm going to just keep doing reps of this thing and doing more exercises until I get it. I just thought that it should come to me, just like everything else had come to me all through life, right? And so there's two things that I didn't learn it at the time, but I learned it later. So anyways, I got to university. First year was reasonably easy, and then second and third years I did extremely poorly because I had no study skills. I remember like in the first year, there was a guy, Florian, who, a German guy. I could see his window from my window of my room. And he was basically from 9 to 5 every day. He was at his desk like this, like head down studying. And I couldn't even sit and study for 15 minutes without a break at that time. Right. And I used to wonder, like, what's he doing all this time? And obviously he graduated with a first and I graduated with a third, which is like the worst you can get in your degree. But I had no study skills. I didn't know how to read a very challenging book or multiple challenging books in a week and then think about the ideas and then go. And so everything, I thought I could do everything last minute, where I just couldn't. And so I barely scraped through and passed. So when I look back on that time, there was the missing study skills, but the other one is the ramp was so shallow early on, and then it got super steep. So I'm thinking, like, why do they make school so easy early on, and then they make it really hard afterwards? Why not make just make it like a bit harder earlier, so you got more time, right?
Yeah.
So that's the thing I don't want Rami to face. I want him to like develop good study skills and so that he can apply those himself once he doesn't have me to like boss him around. And I want him to learn enough math now so that I want him to be learning math at the level that it's like it should be constantly challenging. The rate of challenge should be constant, so that he can get through, say, like, calculus BC by, say, end of 8th grade, and then he can start doing interesting stuff.
Right. So you're trying to like flatten that curve. So instead of like it's like crazy challenging at the end, you're just like, okay, well now, because we want to flatten that curve, now you need to kind of be advanced in specific things so that later on it's not just as steep.
Yeah, and also you can apply the stuff to things, right? Because then it's like, okay, you want to do something in computer science, or you want to do something in physics or whatever. You've got some, or even if you want to do something in biology. Let's say you start studying biology and you know how to analyze data with pandas and you understand statistics. Think how much of a head start you have over somebody who just studied biology and basically knows like GCSE, like barely knows GCSE maths.
Yeah.
Or like, equivalent of let's say someone who's topped out at like algebra 1 or algebra 2.
100%. Yeah, I really like the idea of that. Then you can apply it. Like math actually becomes really interesting once you know enough of it. But sort of early on, it's very uninteresting, right? When you're just like, okay, I gotta get through my multiplication tables and fractions. Like that's not very interesting. Like I've tried to make games to make that interesting, and it's like, all right, are they baking? Like what are they doing here with the fractions? But like very quickly after that, when you master these fundamentals, you can do really, really interesting games or real world projects or whatever it is, right?
Yeah. And I saw that a lot, even in work, right? Like when I worked at Amazon, I worked with some like operational research scientists, and I could barely understand what they were doing, right? So luckily I had them to help me to understand the stuff to be able to then help the business. But it was like, I was like, man, why am I so dumb that I can't understand this stuff? It's not because I'm literally dumb and I don't have the intellect to understand it. Just that I'm so unprepared because I can't understand it because I don't even have the prerequisites for the prerequisites for that to learn the thing that they're doing.
Right. Interesting. So how's that going? How is flattening the curve for Rami going? How did you get started with that? Like what has worked, what has failed?
Oh, okay. So starting, I didn't like, initially I wasn't thinking about flattening the curve. It was just like naturally wanting to show him stuff and teach him things. I remember like one of the earliest things was I was trying to get him to recognize numbers. And there's this book called like Teach Your Baby Math or Teach Your Toddler Math by Glenn Doman. And it has this idea that you show the kid these cards with patterns of dots on them, and it's got, let's say, 3 dots, and you say 3 and you take it away, and you do that, and you can do that with cards. He claims you can do that with cards up to like 200. and the kid
Wow.
will be able to recognize them. I don't think it's true. I think, because I haven't seen any evidence that it works if you randomize the positions of the dots. I can
Right.
believe that a kid could distinguish between 100 different cards just by looking at little patterns here and there, but I don't believe they can do it based on the number.
Right.
But I tried to do that, so I thought it was interesting. That didn't really work that well, but he did learn to like count, and he learned how to like recognize numbers. And then he was born in China. We lived in Beijing at the time, and I was traveling between Beijing and Shanghai, and we moved here to San Francisco when he was 3. So he was not yet in school. He was in preschool in China for a brief period before we moved. And so then, like there, he spent a lot of his time just playing. Really, it wasn't like doing anything. We weren't doing any like hardcore math apart from the like recognizing numbers. But after we moved here, he was in preschool, and then some of the time I would spend some time teaching him some maths, and I used various types of manipulatives. So like there's these things called math link blocks. They're like these cubes that you can join together, and you can make blocks of 10, or you can do things. And so I used that to kind of explain concepts to him and to giving change and things like that. And later then I looked up, what other things I can use, and I tried using Cuisenaire rods and base 10 cubes, which I remember from when I was a kid. They had base 10 cubes in the classroom. So I used those to help him to understand like the base 10 effectively and being able to add. And then I think he found it interesting. So he would sometimes ask questions about maths, and it's hard for me to think back like 6 years or 5 years, but he wasn't ever resistant to that stuff. He did find it interesting. He had some patience for it. And then what did I do after that?
Oh, you started early.
Yeah, at least that was, so maybe that was when and then, so definitely I started something before he was 3 for sure, because I remember that was in our apartment in Beijing, so that's for sure. But the other stuff, I think it was more like when he was like 4 or 5. But I remember even when he was in preschool, when he was in preschool, I remember they had some sort of like test of like something. They used to give them some math worksheets to do at preschool, and they were giving them, and it was a Chinese immersion preschool, but they had some math worksheets, and they had to do something like add single digit numbers or something like that, something very, very, very basic. And so I asked them, can I just give him something? Can I give him some worksheets from home so that he can just do something at his level? And they were like, yeah, fine. So I gave them to them, and they were really good. They actually, not only did they give him those worksheets, but they actually marked them for him. I thought they were just going to give them to me, and so I can correct them, right? So they were good. And I remember like them telling us at the, when we had like, we have a meeting with them every year or something to see how it's going. And they were like, oh, we had this test, and we asked them to, count to 20 in Chinese or whatever. And then they were like, we had to ask Rami to do it backwards because otherwise it's too easy. Wow. They're going to count down from 20 instead. I think he found that stuff interesting. And then, so it's still on the topic of math, right? So the other thing for math is I did buy the Beast Academy books. Like they used to only have Beast Academy books from like grade 2 onwards. Mm-hmm. Then they released the 1A and 1B books. So I bought those, and Rami did like actually reading them. So he actually I think he read a lot of the Beast Academy 1 and 2 level books, because the comics are so beautiful, and he loves reading like comics. He loves reading comics in particular, and he loves cute characters. So he read those, but he didn't like doing the practice problems. So there's for each level, there's a guidebook and a practice book. And the practice book you're meant to, it's a workbook, right? And he didn't do any of them. Like maybe a couple of pages, and I couldn't get him to do it. So,
so I saw age?
This was. I'm trying to think now. I'd have to look it up. I don't remember. Okay. I probably can look it up actually. But just
because I'm thinking like, I don't know, any age under like 10, like it's pretty impossible to get any kid to just want to do the workbooks. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm trying to think, when did I buy Beast Academy 1A? I'm going to look it up right now, actually, because I want to know when did I... So I think early 2022, so that was when he was 5.5, he was working through Beast Academy 1A.
Wow.
So it's around the right age, actually, because you normally enter first grade around 5 or 6 years old, right? So it wasn't super early, but he was not in school yet at that time, because he started school.
Was that when you were transferring from Beijing to San Francisco?
No, it wasn't because of that, because he was 3 when we moved. So that was way before school anyway. But in San Francisco, you have to turn like 5 before August 30th in order to go to school. So he turned 5 in. He turned 5 just after August 30th, 2021. So he entered school in 2022, right? Is that right? Something like that, yeah. So he was 5.5. He was still at home. Like he was still in preschool, not in regular school. So I wanted to teach him some math because he was ready for it.
Makes sense. Well, were you like always going to schooling for sure? Did you ever consider other types of schooling? What do you think of other types of schooling? What kind of school does he go to?
Yeah, so we did not consider other types of schooling. Like my wife she grew up here in San Francisco. She went to, I think public school first, and then a private school for maybe middle school, and then Lowell for high school, magnet public high school. I went to regular schools, like both government schools and private schools. So we'd never. I don't think either of us have encountered anybody who had homeschooled their kids or encountered kids that were homeschooled when we were kids, right? I know people now as adults who told me they were homeschooled, but it's very rare. So it wasn't even on our radar. Mm-hmm. Because Rami grew up, was born and was up to 3 was in Beijing. His Mandarin was pretty good. I mean, equivalent to like a 3-year-old Chinese kid. And we wanted that to continue. So that's why we put him in a Mandarin immersion preschool here in San Francisco, where you have to speak Chinese. And I remember like he got like told off a couple of times for speaking English with other kids, rather than speaking Chinese or speaking Mandarin. And our intention was to put him into a Mandarin immersion Mandarin immersion school. So fortunately, in San Francisco, there are 2 public schools that do have Mandarin immersion programs, and there are like 2 from K through whatever, and there are, I think there's more now, but I think there were at least 2 private schools that do Mandarin immersion. So our plan was apply to put the Mandarin immersion public schools at the top of the list in the lottery, where you have to put a rank ordered list of the schools you're considering, and then apply to the Mandarin immersion programs. If he gets into one of those, any of them, great. Ideally, we wouldn't have to pay and we go to a public one. If not, hopefully he'll get into one of the private ones and we'll pay and he'll be fine. And I was not really thinking about the academics at that time when we were making that decision. And then as the time got closer to when we had to make a decision, this was so he would have been, so when the 6, like 9 months before he would have started regular school, yeah. I was talking to one of there's a couple of people that were pivotal to this actually. So the two people that I spoke with about it. One was Matt Bateman. I talked to him, and he was I don't know how he agreed to call with me, but he got on a call with me and gave me some of his thoughts on school. And I was talking about what I was looking for in a school and how I was thinking about it. And I was thinking about like, even if I send him to a public school, I can always supplement the academics outside, right? So it's not a big deal. And he was like, well, that's assuming that the worst impact a school can have is neutral. And I was like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. And so that kind of made me think. But I think it was either around that same time or before that, I'd exchanged some WhatsApp messages with this woman whose kid was in my son's preschool. Her kid's a bit younger, and she is a teacher at SFUSD at the San Francisco School District. And I was telling her about my issue that I was thinking about academics, because by the time Rami starts school, he'll be the oldest in the year, and I think he's reasonably on top of things. He's kind of advanced, so they'll be teaching him to sound out letters when he can already read, and they'll be teaching him to 1+1. Because at that time I looked at the curriculum, the California Common Core curriculum, and I was like, hang on, this is stuff that he's already mastered, and this is almost 6 or 9 months or whatever before he was going to enter the grade. And this is what they should do by the end of the grade. So he's at least a year ahead or a year and 9 months ahead. So what do I do? This lady, she told me, this elementary school teacher, she told me that, hey, there's a school in the South Bay called Nueva that you should check out, because I think you might find it interesting. So I looked it up and I noticed 2 things about it. One is it's for gifted kids, whatever. I didn't know what that was. And it was really expensive. Those are the 2 things I could see about it, right? But it did sound appealing. And the application deadline was coming very, very soon. And to apply, you had to have a psychologist administer an IQ test. It's called an IQ test. It's got it's the WISC something number test. I think the WISC 4 or something like that test. And it's administered one-on-one with a psychologist, and it gives a score to see how on some different dimensions like processing ability and working memory and stuff like that. And I needed to book that test and then submit the application to the school, and then they would consider whether they wanted him to invite him for the interviews or whatever. So I was kind of excited when I read about the school that there's actually schools that might cater to him, etc. So then I was like, okay, but this is the only one I'm applying to. I didn't know at the time that the acceptance rate is only, even if you meet the bar, the acceptance rate is only about 10%. And I had no idea at that point. I was thinking,
that's
well,
after
if he
you pass the gifted assessment and everything.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Wow. So I didn't know that. And I didn't, so there's various other things about the application process I didn't know. So he didn't get into that school, and I was trying to look for other alternatives. And one of the benefits. So this is the sequence event. So I talked to this. So she recommended Nova. Nova said I had to, got to take Rami to have this test. I took him to have the test. I picked him up from the test, and the psychologist said to me that you can't send him to a regular school. He's going to be bored. But that was the first thing she said when I picked him up. And so then I was like, oh, sugar, what do I do, right? Because the only schools that I'd applied to were, Nova, and then these public schools and these two Chinese immersion school private schools in Beijing, and none of them seem to have like really strong academics. So what am I going to do? And until that point, I'd been like Mandarin immersion was number 1 and number 2 and number 3 priority. It was just like it was a non-negotiable thing for us. Right. And then I realized how important academics were. Gradually over that time, from reading Common Core, talking to Matt Bateman, and talking to my friend, the teacher. So then we thought about another school. There's a school called Tessellations in the peninsula, which is a bit closer to us than, or maybe similar distance to Nova. And like they do things like they teach math by ability, not by age, and they're aimed at gifted kids, so that the peer group might be good. So I was thinking about applying there, but because Rami did well in that test, in that WISC, well, not did well, but they measured him, and he seemed to be like gifted. We applied and joined this organization called Davidson Young Scholars, where they have like basically online forums and some sort of support service where you can get questions answered, and they can kind of help you navigate education situations or other common situations for gifted kids. And through that, I posted on the forum saying, oh, has anyone got their kid at Tessellations? Can you tell me about the school? Because I'm thinking about applying. Because I called them, and they actually had a, and it was this is after the application deadline. So the schools all have an application deadline. Then they have a time when they have like decision week, when all of them release their decisions at the beginning of the week, and you've got to decide by the end of the week. But it's coordinated, right? And then, so I contacted them sometime between the application deadline and decision week, sometime between them, and they had like 1 or 2 spots in kindergarten. And they said to me that maybe it was after this. I mean, whatever it was, I think it was before decision week. And so before I applied, I wanted to talk to somebody that went to the school. And so this lady and her husband, they spent an hour of their time like telling me about the school and other things. And they actually had a kid their kid was at Nueva before, and their kid's best friend was also at Nueva. And they both left at the same time. Their kid went to Tessellations, and their kid's best friend went to Hilldale, which is the school that my son is at now. And I'd never heard of Hilldale because I'd been searching for, schools in San Francisco, and Hilldale is, 10 minutes south of here in Daly City, 10 minutes drive south. It's like very, very close by, but it's not in San Francisco. And at the time, they did not have very extensive marketing. So it just never come up on my radar at all. And it's not marketed primarily as a gifted school, but then that's where they want to, they wanted to go when they started it. But they do say it's academically advanced. The school sounded good. I looked at the website. They had a lot of information about their philosophy of how they teach and whatever online. And I spoke with the mother of the child who this kid's best friend's mom, and she told me about the school, and she told me how it's good, and I thought it sounded great. So anyway, so before I spoke to her, like when I looked it up, and then this was like maybe Wednesday of decision week, and so we've already got our like private school offers at the beginning of the week. You got to decide by the end of the week, and I'm calling the school like on or I email the school on the Wednesday night after I speak to this couple, and then I call the admissions director the next day, and he's like, well, let's talk again on Friday afternoon, because by then I'll know how many spots we have, because people will have given us their decisions. Right. So I spoke to him, and they said like, we've got 1 spot in first grade, and I was like, oh, man, because I'm looking for a kindergarten spot, right? So he said, well, just let's just arrange a time anyway. So we arranged a time for Rami to be assessed. So the assessment was, he was put in a kindergarten classroom this is during term time, right? So during the school year, went in a kindergarten classroom for maybe 2 or 3 hours, and then one-on-one with the principal, where she tested him on some reading and some math stuff.
How big is the school?
The school has it's mostly 1 grade per year. But they had a time a few years ago where they had plans to expand the school. So they had, for one, in the kindergarten grade, they admitted 2 classes. And so as those kids have gotten older, there's 2 classes in that grade. So when Rami joined, it was K through 8. So there were 9 grades, and then one of them has 2. So there were like 10. There were 10 classes. So let's say 10 times, so probably like 170 kids or something like that.
Okay, yeah, because it's impressive that the principal is doing assessments
The principal is
one-on-one.
amazing. Miss Clayton, she's amazing. It's like the kind of person that if you were like a hiring manager and you're trying to hire somebody, that's like she's the kind of person you'd want to hire for this role 10 times out of 10.
Wow.
So she assessed him, and then she suggested. Then we had, then it was a nail biting because we had to, wait a couple of days, whatever. And she told us that they'd admit him, and they suggested he should go into first grade. So that was a cherry on top for me that he was going to go into first grade. It was not even I just wanted somewhere where they cared about academics. That was the main thing, and he'd be around some peers who were, maybe advanced. And then then we turned down the other schools because the academics were not up to scratch at all. Like the two. I'm going to track back a bit. So I talked, during that process when I was starting to get concerned about academics, I had a call with the principal at the school that my son got allocated in the first round of the SFUSD lottery, and that I was so disheartened when I spoke to the principal because that school is like one of the most popular schools in San Francisco in terms of like the number of applicants. The people that put it top of the list versus the number of places, and she told me that there's zero chance that the kindergarten teacher is going to teach any first grade math material. No chance. And they don't do subject like single subject acceleration at all.
Yeah.
And she's seen grade skip once in her career, not at that school, once in her entire career.
She's only seen it.
Yeah. So it's like not even like, so I was like, what? And then anyway, so in the later round of the lottery, he got allocated to the school we put top of the list, which was, one of the Mandarin immersion ones. So we had that as an option, but by the time, by the time we had that as an option, we were just like, well, we don't want to do that, right? Because we wanted to have good academics. And the private schools were actually no better. Like one of them, like I asked the same question to both of these schools. I'm not going to name the schools, but one of them, I asked the head of the lower school, what do you do for kids that are ahead? Say if someone's ahead in math, what do they do? And she said, oh, well, if they're ahead in math, then we help them develop other skills like leadership skills that they can teach the other kids. And I'm thinking, I don't want to pay you like $30,000-$40,000 a year, and then you have my kid teaching other kids math. I want you to teach him math, right? Like that's what I was thinking. I didn't say it. And then the other school said to me, well, if a kid's ahead, we've got this, we give them an iPad and they can use this adaptive learning app called Dreambox. And I was thinking, well, again, it's $30,000-$40,000 a year. Dreambox is $100 one-off for a 10-year subscription, not $100 a year, $100 one-off. So why would I pay you that much to like have him self-study on Dreambox? So that was pretty disheartening. So we were super fortunate that Ms. Clayton admitted Rami to Hilldale, even though we applied super late. And he's been, he's loved the school. He really, really, really likes it. He really likes the other kids. And the reasons I was excited about it at the time, one, just focus on academics, and they try to do most things around a year ahead. So that was a big draw for me. The main draw, I think, at the time. Second thing was that they do single subject acceleration for math when kids need it. So, I knew of this one
subject,
kid.
Meaning you can
just for math.
skip a grade
Just
in
for
a
math.
specific. Okay.
Just math. Yeah. So what they do, so they have all the math classes almost all the math classes at the same time. Yeah. So there was this, so that the couple that I spoke to, that kid's best friend, he was in third grade, but he was doing math with fifth graders. So because the timing all matches up, so he just had to go to the fifth grade class during that lesson. So I figured, well, Rami's going to be challenged at whatever level he needs. But the thing that I hadn't thought about was how the school, that they have really good standards for behavior and about kindness or whatever. So there's a lot of softer things that I didn't think about with my narrow focus on academics that are super important. Like I do want Rami to be just a nice, kind person and to treat people well. And so they do a lot of emphasis on and also they do a lot of emphasis on understanding your emotions and trying to deal with them. They don't let things fester. So it's right. Good.
Interesting. So and Matt Bateman wasn't able to convince you at all about the merits of maybe a Montessori school or some alternative schools.
Yeah, no, he told me about the options. I think because at the time he was still working with Ray and those folks, so he did tell me a little bit about what they did. I can't remember if they had I did look up after that call what they had around, but it wasn't there was nothing convenient or that seemed the right fit for Ray.
Makes sense. Okay, so tell me about. So it seems like originally the main decision criteria was around Mandarin.
Yes.
Later on, did you figure out maybe you can do this after school, other programs, or how are you dealing with Mandarin now?
Yeah, I deluded myself that we could do that, but I don't think we can actually, because we'd have to, because neither my wife nor I are native Mandarin speakers. My wife speaks it much better than I do. Partly because she grew up speaking Cantonese as a home language, and she just studied Mandarin harder, and then I did, and she also worked at a Chinese company in a role where she was for 9 years, where she was using Mandarin every day in oral conversations. I used Mandarin at work only for one-on-ones with colleagues. I didn't use it for like all other meetings and working at foreign companies. So anyway, so it's not a language we use to communicate with each other.
Yeah.
We could have, when we moved here, decided that, we're going to do that, but it would have been hard. And now I think it's impossible because my Mandarin's like degraded so much that it's hard for me to express myself well enough, quickly enough, and it would be frustrating. So we did try like having him do some like online, I think we found a teacher on OutSchool or something and had him do some online lessons. That didn't work well. We had like a friend of a friend in Hong Kong, a friend of a friend in Beijing, do some lessons with him. That didn't really work very well. Like it's hard to get a kid to actually speak. It's easy to teach them stuff or teach them, but it's hard to lecture them. It's hard for them to get them to actually speak enough to get practice.
You have to be immersed.
Yeah, I think so. So the only thing we're doing, I think it's true, because even like when I, those immersion schools in San Francisco, when I listen to the when you go to the presentation, they don't let you speak to the kids, right? They just show you some pre-canned presentation of the kids speaking. Yeah. And I wasn't impressed with these 8th graders speaking Mandarin, because I was like, hang on, my Mandarin sounded better than that when I'd been like in China 2 years, right? It wasn't like so, and you've been studying doing Mandarin for 9 years at school, so it's like actually hard without immersion. So all he's doing right now is he's using Scritter, which is an app. So when I was learning to write in Chinese, I used Scritter. At that time, it was either it was a PC application or maybe a web application. But you needed a Scritter. You needed a Wacom tablet, like this kind of like tablet thing, to be able to use it, right? To be able to write the characters, and it's a spaced repetition program for learning to write Chinese. So it gives you a random Chinese character. You're not writing the same character 100 times, which is what the normal way is. Normally, you just have like a sheet of things and you write it 100 times, then you write a different character 100 times. But that doesn't teach recall. It only teaches muscle memory, and it won't help you to associate the character with the meaning or the sound. So I used that, and it worked well for me at the time. So then I got Rami to use that, and now it's on the iPad or iPhone or whatever. So it's actually much easier. You don't have to have an extra piece of equipment. So he does that every day, where he practices whatever cards are due. And he also uses Anki every day. And I loaded a deck of Chinese vocabulary into Anki, like Chinese like characters into Anki. Most of those characters are things where he'd recognize them in context if he heard them orally, but he doesn't know the character. So he's trying to learn the characters. And I took the list from where did I take? I forgot where I got the list from. But sorry, the other thing was there's a set of books called, if you look up like Sage Books Chinese 500, Sage, S-A-G-E, Sage Books 500, there's a set of books, and you can get it in traditional characters or simplified characters. And the books, there are 25 books. Each book introduces 20 characters. Each character is introduced in a chapter. Am I looking at the right ones? Yeah, so they have a picture at the top, and then they have some like a sentence with maybe like 10 characters or 5 characters at the bottom. And every chapter introduces a new character, and it builds on characters from the previous one. So you're basically meant to read it all the way through. So we started going through those books, and then it just became, I still intend for Rami to read those books, but we got through maybe like the first 5 out of 25 or 6 out of 25 or something.
Got it. Okay, so focus started with number one priority was Mandarin, but then because of various experiences and also getting him tested, finding out about the highly giftedness, your focus changed towards academics. Yeah. I want to just hear more about, how do you think about academics? Why are academics so important to you? What do academics mean to you? Like, how would you even describe, if you're talking to a parent who thinks like, oh, academics, I don't know, like, I just want the kid to be happy. How do you persuade them? And I guess let's start with how do you define academics?
So when I think about academics, I tend to think about some core skills about thinking, about communication, and about calculation. So it's like the 3 R's or whatever they call it, like reading, writing, and arithmetic, right? It's like you're trying to understand things from reading, you're trying to communicate ideas through writing, and also developing your thinking through writing, and then using math to understand things. A lot of our disagreements about how things are rooted in numeracy. A lot of it, like when there are so many things about which I don't have an opinion, just because I know that I don't understand the numbers enough. So if you talk to me
Right.
about, oh, are the tariffs that the US government put in place, are they good or bad? I can
Right.
give you some intuitive reason why I think they might be bad.
Yeah.
And I can maybe come up with some arguments why they might be good in the long run for, like, as part of industrial policy. But
Right.
I haven't done the math. I have no idea. I don't really know, right? So I can't, for me to say
And
to you
that's, I
either
think you
way
have like a
very
master's
strongly.
in economics and politics and from Oxford, and you're like, you know what? I don't know. Too complicated. That's
Yeah, so
great.
maybe it's a cop out to say I don't know, right? But honestly, I don't know. So I haven't done the math. And so many of my
Right.
disagreements, even like, you've worked in like developing products, right? If you're looking on a very micro scale, when you're trying to decide, okay, what should we do, or what should we do next? You look at the product metrics and you try to understand what's going on. And even that's hard, because you
Yeah.
might think, oh, well, there's this thing about, oh, but there's selection bias in here or something. So you need to be able to have some sense of like numeracy to be able to analyze situations. And when I hear parents say, oh, it's fine, I didn't do like math beyond algebra 2 and I'm fine and whatever, and I'm like, yeah, but
Right.
you're fine. Yes, that's true in terms of you're able to live a comfortable life, but you also have a bunch of opinions about stuff that you have no business having an opinion about, because you don't understand it. I'm not going to say that to them, but that's what I'm thinking. So I'm not gonna try to convince somebody that they don't understand enough math. I don't understand.
Right.
I don't understand enough math, right? Just to be clear. But I'm not going to try to convince somebody else that they don't understand enough math. 'Cause I tried it once and it didn't work. They just couldn't. Like someone I was talking to who's in their 30s, works at very decent job at a company you'd have heard of, and
Yeah.
they don't understand math beyond like compound interest, and they're like, yeah, it's fine. And I'm thinking, you're working on like government policy stuff for this company. Like, how can you think that the math doesn't matter,
Right.
or that your understanding of math doesn't affect your life? So I tried it once, it didn't
Interesting.
work. So now I don't try.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, but I think most of us don't care about having opinions that are correct, right? Let's say if you think about, there's two that form your opinion, or that should be ideally inputs into your opinion. One is some values, which are, let's just say your values are fixed, right? And you think this is important and this isn't important.
Right.
And then you have data or information, and you somehow combine those to have an opinion about something. So I might have an opinion about equality or something, whether
Right.
it's and that value about equality, and I might then have information about immigration policy, right, about what it actually is, and I might then combine those two to say, like, yeah, do I think immigration policy is good or bad? Now, if you can't analyze that information, then whatever opinion you come out with may or may not be consistent with the information and your values. More likely, you're just going to have an opinion based on what your friends or your peer group tells you, and you're going to be able to argue with somebody who's uninformed about the thing and justify your opinion, or maybe argue with a child and justify your opinion. But you're not really going to have a well-formed opinion, and you're not really going to have a good understanding of the world. So but you don't need that. Most people do not need that to have a reasonable life, right? So
Right.
if you don't care, or you could pretend you have it and not actually be like kind of live in a delusional state where you think you understand stuff or understand more
Right.
than you do, then it's fine, right?
That's
Because
interesting.
you're not,
Yeah.
because most of those things are not actionable, right? Like, so if I understand, I don't know, like something like let's say if I understand Simpson's paradox, right? And then someone says, hey, look, why is it that the classic example of, like, there was some particular university course where like women were being admitted at lower rates than men in this particular university. And it's like, why is that? Like, are they discriminating against women or whatever? And then you look at it and it's like, you look at the breakdown, and actually for every single course, women were being admitted at higher rates than
Right.
men, right? And then it's like, oh, because of Simpson's paradox, because the women were all applying for the harder courses, and that's why they had a lower admissions rate overall. But you can go through your whole life without understanding that. It's not going to affect you unless you're working in university admissions. And then you
Right.
probably care about some other thing anyway. You don't care about like fairness.
Right. But when you're thinking about Rami, you're like, math is the like foundation of all these different ways of thinking and problem solving.
Yeah,
and
it's a foundation for understanding stuff in
Right.
general. Like, whether, like, I can't think of many fields where math does not help you to understand them.
Makes sense. And so, do you feel like you've been able to sort of persuade him with these arguments, or do you feel like you've just made it sort of fun and exciting, and you kind of found the right resources, right apps, right books to get him kind of interested in it somehow?
I do try to tell him that math is useful for other things, and I don't think he really gets it. Like, he sometimes will ask, how do they do X, Y, Z? And I'll be like, well, they use a lot of math. Like, it's just like, so I tried to like explain that, but I don't think he fully gets it yet. Like, I don't think he understands how, say, like, medicine or something, how math is used in medicine, or how, so maybe he'll understand it at some point, but I'm not sure he's internalized it.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I don't think most adults understand, They
Yeah.
just like they think it's like science is like you put some math in there and some chemistry and you mix it around and then like medicine comes out or something.
Right.
And like
right,
to some
right.
extent that's true, but like people don't really understand like how like something like arithmetic or calculus or algebra like plays a role in all of that. Like they think there's like a different type of math that is the one that actually solves the problem. They don't understand like that's the like, core of it. Cool. You mentioned the Davidson's Young Scholars Institute. Is it an institute?
It's I don't know what it is. It's called Davidson Institute. So it's called Davidson Institute, and they have a bunch of different programs. One of them is called Davidson Young Scholars, which is the.
Is he part of the Young Scholars one?
Yeah. Yeah.
And is the Young Scholars one for like the most highly gifted?
It's for the youngest. It's for the younger ones, right? So you basically have to in order to be accepted, you have to have proof of they've got like 2 or 3 different tests they accept, and you have to have in a certain percentile in one of those tests or a certain level, and you have to fill in an application form, but there's no cost and there's no ongoing commitment. It's just that by doing it you get access to these like in forums that are open to other people who are members. So that's the biggest value, is that you have a peer group,
right? But yeah, I've heard like it's quite competitive to get in. Like I think there's a lot of indie like gifted Facebook groups. People really like hope that they can get into this
right. Yeah, and I'd not heard of it until after we'd done that test. So it was just that when I mentioned it to a friend, one of my wife's college friends, and she mentioned, if you got that thing, you should apply to this thing because you get some free support, whatever.
Yeah,
that's why we did.
So tell me about Giftedness. Like I love that you didn't really know much about it, and it just sort of like came about, and that he ended up being like really high up there with like with his score and being able to be part of the Davidson Institute. Now that you've been through a couple of years of knowing about giftedness, learning through the other peers at the Davidson Institute and other parents at the school, which is like very gifted focused, what kind of advice would you have given yourself before? What have you learned? What do you like? What does giftedness mean, I guess?
Okay, so I think I would have been on look out a bit earlier for things that he would have been ready to learn sooner. So I think the biggest one for that is I read on Hacker News, which is, for people that don't know, is a discussion forum for people that are interested in startups and technology. And I read a comment on there about someone recommending this book called How to Teach Your Child to Read, Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons by, I think, Siegfried Engelmann. And I read about that book, like it was 6 weeks before Rami's 4th birthday. So I immediately ordered it. And then when I got it, started like teaching him. And then, 3.5 months later, we finished the book. And then he was reading independently from then.
Wow.
And now when I talk to people who have kids that are like 3 years old or close to 3, I say, hey, look, if you're, and if I think that their kid is, so, like if they're bright parents, I assume their kid is going to, has a chance of being bright. Then I would say to them, hey, look, get this book. When the kid turns 3, try the first few lessons over a few days. If it works well, then continue. If not, try again a month later, and then keep doing that every month until it kind of feels like the right thing. And then, whereas I feel like Rami could have been ready a year earlier, maybe. I don't know, right? Maybe it was the perfect time when he was just turning 4. I don't know, right? But I would have been more on the lookout of things that I could do and teach him in a more structured way. Mm-hmm. And then, but I think the other things are like I would have thought harder earlier on about the idea that this idea of desirable difficulty, where you want to be challenging a learner at the level that they're ready for now, and not just it shouldn't ever be easy, because things like the learning compounds.
Interesting. And so what would you say to the parents that are like, what's the rush? Like, why are you trying to, you know what I mean? Like learn reading so early or skip grades or all these things?
Yeah. Well, I'd probably ask is like, when did you learn linear algebra? And for most people, the answer would be you didn't.
Right.
So that's the answer. Like I remember, like when I was in my what was it? When I was working at Amazon between 2012 and 2014, and I remember I started going through Andrew Ng's free machine learning course, the one he published like many years ago. I was stuck a bit because I realized I didn't understand enough linear algebra. I didn't understand any linear algebra. Like I knew how to multiply matrices, and that was it. And so then I got this book called by Sheldon Axler called Linear Algebra Done Right. Linear Algebra Done Right. Or either Linear Algebra Done Right or Linear Algebra the Right Way, something like that. And I started working through it. And I got through maybe a third of the book, and I got to this one page, and I think I was taking me maybe 20 minutes per page or something to go through it, including like doing the like little exercises. And then this got one page, I was stuck on it for 3 or 4 hours. And I was like, I don't know. Now I think about it, I feel like crying, but I didn't cry at the time, but I felt really defeated that I just couldn't understand it. And I was like, so then I took the book to work and asked one of my colleagues who was smarter than me, had worked harder than me, whatever. I said, look, I'm trying to learn this topic. I don't understand it. Can you help me? And he was like, yeah, sure. Just show me. And so then he was like, okay. So he read the page and he's like, okay, what don't you understand? And I'm like, okay. Then I was explaining why I didn't understand this thing. Proof. And partway through, while I was explaining it, it suddenly clicked, and I realized why the thing made sense. And to this day, like learning enough linear algebra is on my list of things to do. And now I'm just like, life is busy, and I can come up with lots of excuses why. I can come up with lots of excuses why I haven't done it, but that's the thing. There's a lot of math to learn, and if you learn the easy stuff early, then you have more time to learn the more interesting and more applicable stuff.
That's really interesting, because it's very true that one just has much more time when you're younger.
Yeah,
and maybe, I don't know if this is true, but maybe like one is also just very able to learn a lot of things when you're young. I don't know. Maybe it's just a time.
I think it's
like
partly because you're used to it as well. So all the prerequisites are fresh.
That's right. That's it. Yeah, you nailed it. Exactly.
So any given time, the prerequisites are fresh because you studied them in the last month.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool. Okay, so you've mentioned already a bunch of tools and resources and books. What other like apps or programs or even just like strategies? For example, let's start with, you mentioned the book, Learning to Read in 100 Easy Lessons.
Teach your child to read in 100 Easy Lessons.
So there's kind of like two components to like reading. It's like being able to read, having the technical skill of reading. But then there's a whole nother, like more arguably like very important thing that most people don't have, which is like the love of reading and loving to read. And you've told me that Rami loves to read. Is that just something that came naturally to him? Is that something that you had some
honestly,
strategies about?
I don't know. Like, from when he was a kid, my wife read to him every night, and we had a nanny when we were in Beijing, and she would read to him a lot, both in Chinese. And so he was always around books. And I remember actually we were extremely fortunate. Soon after he was born, there was this couple that lived down the road from us in Beijing, and like a Canadian couple, and they had to suddenly, like within a few days, had to move back to Canada. And the woman had been doing some homeschooling and then some homeschooling or tutoring or something, and they had 1,000 books that they needed to get rid of. So I paid them like roughly $1,000 for these 1,000 books, and then we like used some cart to get them all to our apartment, and then I bought some custom bookshelves to put them on. So there was when Rami started experiencing books, he had like 1,000 books around. So he always around books, and he always had somebody who was willing to read him a book. So I think that's part of it. So I think the book that I used to teach him to sound out words and learn to decode was helpful, but I don't know that that's the thing that made him love reading. But I'm sure that actually having interesting books to read definitely helps. Because I don't think that when I was a kid,
like, was he allowed to read any of those 1,000 books, or how did you?
Yeah, he could read whatever. Like, so that time he was not reading, right? But then we didn't bring all the books here. We brought quite a lot of them. But then he chooses his own reading materials. So I try to nudge him towards things that I think are good. There are books that there are a couple of books that I mandated that he read, right, which are like. But mostly he just chooses his own books, and then sometimes I'll recommend a book to him and he'll be like, "Nah, I'm not interested," and then maybe 6 months later he'll pick it up, and then he might get into it. Like that was like that with the Wings of Fire series. And then there are other things where I'd like it if he just spent less time reading comic books and more time reading things that I want him to read. Like I want him to read things like one of our friends, for his birthday a couple of years, bought him this book called The Number Devil. It looks like a really good book, and I'm like, it's a really good choice. And then this book, Hamish bought him this book, and it's still sitting like unread 2 years later. I'm still trying to get him to read it, but I don't. He will eventually, but I don't know when.
But you don't take away the comic books or like prohibit the comic books or anything like that.
No. So he just he can, like, and also he uses like the library apps on his iPad to get whatever books they have, and then and when we go to the library, and the local library has a lot of stuff because they have pretty well funded, and so when he borrows books from the library, they're usually like 9 out of 10 will be something with a lot of pictures.
Okay. Very cool.
Even though he can read other books, so he's read books that have 0 pictures as well, like many of those, but he prefers the ones that have pictures every few pages at least.
Makes sense. Okay, so other apps, tools, things that you found that
Math
were,
Academy.
the best?
Math Academy is the biggest one. That's the one that I spend like a lot of my time thinking about. Is how so Math Academy, for those who don't know, is an online, it's a website. It looks very bare, but it's effectively an online textbook combined with spaced repetition. I'm underselling it a bit, but that's mostly what it is. So you go in, you do a diagnostic test, it places you in a course, and then each course is made up of lessons, reviews, quizzes, and diagnostic tests. You spend most of your time doing lessons, and lessons are, there's a bit of textbook explanation, there's a bit of worked example, and then there's one or more questions that you have to answer, which usually, you might need to, you could do in your head, or you might need paper and pencil to do it. And it will use your answers to know what to present to you next. So the guys that made it have created a knowledge graph of like all of math from 4th grade up to probably 1st or 2nd year of undergrad, and with every tiny topic, what are the dependencies of it? Like, so what are the prerequisites to that topic?
Right.
So it presents you with stuff that's just at the, in your zone of proximal development, or whatever it's called.
Oh, that's amazing. Very cool. And so do you do this, or do Rami
so
do it,
Rami
or
does
do
this.
you do it together?
So I did it actually. I used it myself for like 2 months back when I had a break between jobs, and I was spending an hour or more a day doing math. I loved it. But then I got busy and stopped doing it. But Rami has been doing it now for like, I don't know, year and a half or so. So he's completed 3 courses. He completed the 4th grade math course, the 5th grade math course, and the pre-algebra course. The pre-algebra course took him about, during when he was in the pre-algebra course, he was studying 4th grade math at school. So he was in 3rd grade at school. He was doing 4th grade math at school, using the Singapore Math 4A and 4B books. But during that time, he was finishing 5th grade math, and then he was doing pre-algebra. The pre-algebra course took him about 50 hours in total of concentrated effort, spread over about 7 months. So it's a pretty efficient use of time, because if you compare it to like at school you're spending, and his school, you spend an hour a day doing math for like 195 days, right? So 195 hours in a year, and he did pre-algebra in 50. Now it would have been probably a bit more than 50 if he had to also reinforce the earlier topics himself, because the stuff he was doing at school was reinforcing a lot of the background stuff, right, or the prerequisites.
Right.
So he got some value out of that, but probably could have been used the time a little bit differently.
Makes sense. Very cool. I was going to ask something about Math Academy. Oh, yes. When does he do it? How do you, does he enjoy it? How do you get him to do it?
Threats. So his incentive, it's fine. I was reading something the other day about how people incentivize their kids to do things. It's like, do they give them treats or rewards or whatever? And it's like, someone was like, when I was a kid, the incentive was I didn't get screamed at. So it's like it's a bit like that in a way. But no, there's a set of things we call daily habits where he has to do them every, and the things on that list are, one of the things he chose himself, which is Duolingo. So he has to do a couple of minutes of Duolingo to keep his streak going there.
Does he do Mandarin?
Spanish.
Spanish. Okay. Very cool.
Yeah. But I don't know. Yeah, I don't know why he doesn't have anyone to speak Spanish with. But he does Spanish at school, so he's got some interest in it from that. So Duolingo, Scritter for Chinese characters, Anki for a bunch of things, and I'll talk about that if we have time. And Math Academy, school homework, if there is any, and typing, because I want him to touch type. Because for me, again, it was very painful. I learned to type when I got that Acorn Electron. Actually, before that, I started learning to type on a physical typewriter that my dad had taken with him as one of his prized possessions when they were forced out of Uganda as refugees. So somehow this typewriter was important enough to bring. So I started learning to type on there, but it was like I didn't learn the proper technique, right?
Yeah.
And so as I got faster, I was using like 6-7 fingers, and I topped out at like 50 words a minute. So for the last, from when I was 15 to when I was like 45, I was typing at around 50 words a minute. And then I decided, okay, I'm going to learn properly. And I used Keybr, KEYBR.com, to learn the proper fingering positions. And then I managed to get my speed up to around 80 from 50. So then I was, so it's a little bit more comfortable, a little bit less hand movement as well. So I think I don't want him to go through that same pains. I'd rather he learn properly from the start rather than having to relearn something where it's hard because you're like, but my old way is much faster. I don't want to transition to the new way. But that eventually it's going to be faster, right? So it's a hard decision to make, so I don't want him to make it. But so we have an expectation that he has to do these things every day, and he ticks them off. And he was using an app on his iPad called Habits, I think, before, but it's done by a single developer. It's a bit buggy, so he recently switched to another app called Streaks, which I don't like as much, like the user interface, but the it's much, it doesn't seem buggy at all. So it does track everything properly. And for Math Academy, the minimum you have to do is 17 XP. So you get XP in Math Academy for doing activities. So if you do a lesson, it'll have a budget of like how many points that lesson has. So let's say it has 7 XP. If you do that lesson perfectly, you'll get a bonus of 2, so you'll get 9. If you get one question wrong, you might get all the points. If you get 2 questions wrong, you'll get 6 points maybe, or 5. And if you get a few questions wrong, it'll just exit out and you'll get negative XP or 0 XP for that lesson. Okay. So he has to get at least 17 XP a day. So we had that as a process, and the idea was that he'd do that every day except on days when he has an after school activity like swimming or soccer or something. Now he's actually doing Math Academy at school instead.
Okay.
So as I said, that most of the math classes at Hilldale are at the same time, but the middle school math teacher teaches like 3 or 4 of the classes, and those obviously cannot be at the same time. So, and the class that was the right level for Rami, which is the one that would have been using the Singapore Dimensions 8 books, was at a time that overlaps with this like literature class or something. So we agreed with the principal that he would just work independently with support from the middle school math teacher. So he spends Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, he spends an hour with the middle school math teacher. The first half hour, they're alone. The second half hour is he's in the classroom, but the teacher is teaching Algebra 2 to another class. So he gets some one-on-one time. He gets some time to do Math Academy on his own. So I'm hoping this is going to work out well. And then he can eventually like not do any Math Academy at home if he can do enough of it at school.
Okay, let's talk a bit about just education as a whole and EdTech as a whole. Maybe let's start here. If you had a magic wand and you could fix one thing in the education system or about schools or about how parents or people think about, or teachers or administrators think about schools, what's the one thing that kind of comes to mind of you would want to fix that?
If it was magic wand, then it'd be like, the young lady's illustrated primer. Obviously, like just to have something that you could just use that just knew you and could teach you everything you needed to know, and was always understood your level. So this is, I think, the dream of companies like Khan Academy or others, right? That they want to build something like that. I don't know if that was what you were asking about, though, or whether you were talking about something more practical.
So you're talking about like the dream of the like ultimate AI tutor type thing.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it's exciting because we're like, that's where everybody's trying to go to. So that's that's good. What do you think are the most promising experiments or tools or companies in that space right now?
I think Math Academy is one, although it's not doing it the same way. I think Math Academy is one. It's like trying to get things right at the right level. I think ChatGPT is doing a reasonable job of this now. Like if I want to learn something, okay, I'm older and I'm more aware of my prerequisites, but it does help me a lot to learn things, and eventually it's going to get there. I know there are other things like Kanmigo or Synthesis Tutor, but I've not tried them in Angular. I tried Kanmigo earlier and it wasn't very good. Like it gave me some wrong math answers, which I thought was bad, given it was trying to test me on math. But I'm sure these things have gotten better now because they're using better models, and there's going to be more like guardrails and more evals.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, when you look at most of the EdTech like apps right now, they're very like hard coded. Like it's really hard to do like true AI at the moment, but everybody is trying and figuring things out, and things are getting better. And so hopefully we get something in the next few years that works. I mean, we're building in that space. I think every good EdTech company right now is building with AI.
And obviously, what you guys are building is super exciting. Like I like the idea of one thing that I really want Rami to learn that I don't have a great answer to is how do you learn to just operate in the world, and that's partly just having. I think some of the skills that you guys teach are like, strategy and trying to understand what tool is applicable in what situation, how to do teamwork and stuff like that. That's all really important. Right. The other part that I have no clue how to teach is agency, about how you can just be like proactive, and how you can have this belief, but not like self-delusional belief, a belief that you can do stuff and just go and do it. Don't ask for permission. Don't assume that because everyone else is doing something this way, that you have to do it this way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember like when I was doing my MBA, there was a guy who like decided that he was going to do like like 2 degrees at the same time. And I was like, I wouldn't even occur to me that you could do that. Like,
right.
how can you do that? And it's just like, well, just like, why not? Right.
Yeah. That's such an interesting topic. I feel like we could do a whole podcast on agency. My guess is doing a lot of projects, like, the essay, How to Do Great Work by Paul Graham, the whole idea of like truly following your curiosity and doing things just for like your curiosity's sake. I think the more we can give kids real experience with things that they're interested in and just like do real projects, like the
They
idea
need
of like the
time. They need
projects.
time to do that. We just
They need
somehow
time.
like, because right now, like Rami spends 8:30 until 3:30 at least at school, and usually
Yeah.
wants some time after that to play with his classmates. So let's say then 4 to 5 or 5 to 6, he's got some like soccer or swimming most days, and then he's got to come home. We have dinner, and then he's got to do some homework. He's going to do a bit of math academy if he hasn't done enough at school, and then it's
Yeah.
bedtime. And so when's he got time to do like to do a project or start a startup or something?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It's an interesting question. Maybe we can speed up learning. Or I just remember when I was a child, I had so much time. I don't know.
Yeah, I watch like 17 hours of TV a day. I'm sure. Like,
I wish I had like like all the like tools and apps and resources that you're giving Rami, because I think I think it's amazing. I was mainly like watching just whatever is on TV, cartoons like for
yeah. We
hours
had
and
like
hours.
we had 3 channels, I think, when I was a kid, or then the fourth one came out like a few years later. But I think the other thing, I like games. I like games. It's like how we got connected. But there's
Yeah.
a few games I think I love the idea of using games to learn. There was a game I mentioned to you like before, I think, in an email, Human Resource Machine, which
Yeah.
is a PC and iPad game that teaches you about assembly language, but in a very gentle way, where it's like, okay, there's these packages and you've got to reorder them in some way, and it starts off very gentle, and it seems like it's got
Yeah.
quite a shallow learning curve. And there's a physical game called Turing Tumble, which does a similar kind of thing for. As you see, a very similar thing. So I like the idea of like games and games to learn, and games as simulations. Like you must have read Ender's Game, right? About
Mm-hmm.
how these kids learned to do something in the real world
Yeah.
purely through playing games. Now I don't know how far we are from being able to do that, but actually being able to simulate something, like just like in business school, you do case studies, right? But you're
Exactly.
given some really dry d- description of what's happening, and
Yeah.
you're given some extraneous information, but you're also given all the information you need, 100%
Yeah.
of the information you need, and then you have to make a decision. I want something like that, a case study, but as a game.
Yeah.
And it's
100%.
so whether it's like those tycoon type games, but something more with a lot more dimensions and a lot more nuance.
Yeah. You're speaking my language. That's exactly the games we're trying to build right now. It's funny because I struggle with the word game. Where I think like, okay, what do we do at Quest? Like, do we make the like best educational games? And like, an interesting thought for me is that like really what we want to do is just build like the highest quality educational experiences. It just happens to be that whenever you take some sort of like great question or great topic, or you want to kind of impart some skill, the more interactive you make it, the more interesting, the more context you give around the thing, the better. And kind of like at the limit, they all sort of look like some sort of like simulation or game.
Right.
But I think historically and even right now, it's just been so much work to design a very interesting, awesome game around a specific, like a small concept. Like it's almost
Yeah.
like too much work for something that you could just give a question or like a small description for. But with AI and with companies that are dedicated to doing this, I think we can build like amazing experiences for all skills, all concepts, and everything. And then you can have like almost like a math academy, but where like every question or every topic or every part of that like knowledge tree is like some interesting interactive simulation.
That would be awesome. You can just click any node in there, and it's like give you a game. Like you can, yeah. I don't know, like I've used like AI Studio to do like little tools, like the build thing in AI Studio. That in a couple of years, maybe you'll be able to like create a game well enough if you can really think about what it is. Like, right, it used to be the case that it was so long between when you think about something to when you could implement it. Like you think, oh, but when am I going to have two or three weekends to build this? And now maybe you can do something, a first version in a day, or maybe you could do it even faster.
Yeah, 100%. And that's where like I think the idea of like games is also tricky, because when you talk to like a game designer or a game developer about a game, they think about it as this like it needs to be this huge thing that's developed over 2 years, and it's like amazing 3D graphics and all these things. It's like that's not what I'm talking about at all. I'm talking about like what's better than the like interactive like workbook or like adaptive app or whatever.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
what's between those two things? Like the
There's a
factorial and the like interactive question.
there's a really great book on this called by Jesse Schnell, The Art of Game Design. And the subtitle
Oh
is
yes, yes, yes.
a book of lenses, and it has like these different lenses through which you look at games. And I thought about it because I googled it because I remember they had a good definition of what a game is. So when you mentioned like, oh, I don't know whether I'd call it a game, I was thinking like, what did that guy call it in the book? And if Google is right, what in that book what he called it was a problem-solving activity approached with a playful attitude. So that covers
Right.
quite a lot of things. Probably doesn't fit everybody's definition of game, but I think it's a good enough one to start with. Then the play bit is important. It's not just the problem solving. Otherwise, it's just like doing math or doing some other like schoolwork, right? It has to be fun in some way.
Yeah. Although in some way, like the way I think about it is like the perfect game for if you design the perfect game for a specific concept, then the like art of like doing or learning that skill is actually the playing, which is like so far, like I've never actually witnessed a good educational game. Like I've had great games, for example, like a Factorio that happen to teach you things. But anytime there's been like an educator or an education company that tries to design an educational game, to me, they've always been horrible because they don't understand this concept.
Yeah.
It's very hard. Yeah.
It's hard. I think it's just hard in general. Like how do you like say, I would like to be stronger.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way I'm getting stronger is by using the Strong Lifts 5x5 app and some dumbbells. And I do this exercise. And every time I do it, I'm like, I hate doing this. I don't like it at all. I don't like eating so much chicken breast and yogurt or whatever. It's like, but you but I feel stronger and I feel better, right? So I'm confident I'm going to keep improving.
Right.
Sometimes you have to suck it up and just do the work. If you can make a game for learning every skill, then you'll be very rich. Like, it'd be awesome if you. I'm really rooting for you to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's a lot. Like I've thought about, and we've literally come up with lists of like many concepts for which we know we can do it for. I don't know the answer about if we can do that for everything. My gut feeling and intuition is you actually can. Like we're just scratching the surface of what like we even understand about like learning with regards to like actually doing the learning and playing it and all these things. But I don't know. Like, is there like a jiu-jitsu or like a CrossFit for like, working out that like, can you always turn it into some game, or is that just sort of like some, I don't know, like you're almost like pushed, like it's not actually, I don't know. It's very interesting question.
I don't know how you get the shallow ramp, because I found like we were talking about Figgy over email, that game that Jane Street developed.
Yeah,
that's like they say or at least the person that created it says it's a better way to learn about probability or intuition for probability than poker is. And I don't understand enough math to understand if that claim is true or not. I tried playing it and I found it enjoyable for a few minutes, but I also found it frustrating because I didn't know how to get better and I wasn't getting better, and so it wasn't satisfying enough to play on my own. And I don't know who. I'm not gonna I can't convince Sharon, like my wife, or Rami to play Figgy with me, right? Like they got better things to do. So what am I gonna do? What can I do? What can I do even as an adult to have a ramp where I can say go from where I am now to be really good at Figgy or really good at whatever skill Figgy is teaching?
Yeah. So our future Figgy-like game, you need to have challenges that increase in difficulty. It's like you need to have like this is the ramp. I went to go play Figgy and I was terribly confused and it was frustrating. And I'm in like the business of designing these types of games, so I'm like one of the most motivated people to try to learn this game. If I was a kid and I tried playing this game for 2 seconds, I would have moved on to whatever next great game or book. But if you make it, again, you need to follow that zone of proximal development. If the first experience I have with Figgy is something really interesting where I can be successful in, and then the next experience kind of levels you up, next thing you know, you actually really enjoy I think the Figgy game is like deeply flawed, but like you could enjoy a Figgy-like game that is as complicated and as complex. Okay, awesome. Any other favorite resources, books, essays? You've been dropping golden nuggets the entire time, but any other ones that stand out?
Let me think. You know what? I've actually got a doc where I've got like a list where I might have something. Let me just have a quick look at that. Because I used to keep a list when Rami was younger, so I had like more for like 3 to 7 years old. So we talked about Teach a Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons. We talked about Basic Chinese 500 by Sage Books. There's an app called Wukong Shizi on the iPad for learning Chinese. I think that's pretty good. I think it was like $50 one off to unlock all of it. For handwriting, there's the Zaner Bloser books, Zaner Blosser, which were really good, which Rami was recommended to use before he joined Hilldale because his handwriting was not up to snuff. Squitter I mentioned. For typing, I would start with Typing Club, and then for a kid, Typing Club first, then switch to, once they know the lowercase letters, switch to Keyboard to get that really solidified, then NitroType to like have some fun learning speed. Must do for kids that are like 3 or 4. There's a website by Amplify's, fluency.amplify.com. It's the best way to learn math facts, like the multiplication facts and addition facts. Fluency.amplify.com. Really good. Khan Academy Kids app is excellent for younger kids. And then what is it? The others, Beast Academy books are amazing, and they've got an online version now. But I think the physical books are good physical books are the best for the reading, and then the online platform is the best for actually doing the problems because it's just like more adaptive because it gives you the answer straight away. It's not adaptive, but it gives you the corrections straight away. And then BrainPop and BrainPop Junior has really great videos. It's a subscription site, has really good videos for kids to learn about topics. It's fun, but not condescending. Rami's watched tons of those. And then for coding, Scratch, obviously, but there's a thing that Scratch made for kids that are younger. They used to be called Scratch Junior, then they made a new version of it now called OctaStudio. I think it's different. I think it was sponsored by the same organization, but made by a different team. OctaStudio is a really good introduction for learning to code. It's a block-based programming language, and you can use it on an iPad or on your phone. And it's got things like it even responds to phone sensors, so you can make a game in it which depends on tilting the phone or tilting the iPad.
Wow.
So that's really cool. And then for younger kids, there's this thing called Osmo, OSMO, which is you can do some like block-based programming type things, but using physical blocks. And it uses the iPad camera to look at those blocks. So it requires some like spend on the periscope type camera and the pieces, but it's quite fun.
Amazing. Wow, those are so many resources and like so well thought through, like the typing, like the 3 typing at the different skill levels, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, final question. What's like your contrarian belief on education or EdTech or anything like that? Like what's something that you know to be true that you think most parents or most educators or people who think about education kind of get wrong?
I think the point of publicly funded education should be about maximizing the potential of every child. And it shouldn't be about setting some grade level standard and trying to maximize the proportion of kids that reach that standard. And if you try to do that, then the logical conclusion is if somebody's already at the standard, you don't need to do anything for them because they're already at the standard. So no matter what you do, they can't possibly increase the metric that you've chosen to measure your success by. So that I think that's the reason that public education is in my view bad in the US is that we're aiming to maximize the number of kids who are above some arbitrary floor. That floor is pretty low, and we don't care about the kids that are above the floor already.
Interesting. And so like what are some things we can do for those kids? Like somebody who's in policy, somebody who can actually
I mean school choice is one. So allow people to opt out without having to lose the government contribution to education. So right now,
Right.
if you can choose. Like people are going to. I've got an option here, right? That I can send my kid to a school for free, not free in the sense that okay, I've paid taxes and I'm still paying taxes, but
Right.
there's no marginal cost to me. I could send him to a school down the road. I wouldn't have to drive. It's right here. But yet we're willing to pay a whole bunch of money to send him to a school in a different city and drive him there every day. And what does that tell you about the quality of the product you're providing? That people that want it, people that can get it free, are willing to pay for some other version of it.
Right.
So I think the lack of competition is what maintains the status quo. The only way I can see, if you believe that government should fund public education, that's great. But then it doesn't have to be also the provider of education. So allowing people to take those dollars and spend them on something else or whatever their choice of schooling is, I think would generally be good for the system. I'm not saying there are no downsides to doing that, but generally it would be good and it would lift the quality of education in the US by a lot.
Wow, makes sense. 100%. Rahim, thank you so much.
Thank you. This is fun.
I knew it was going to be fascinating. I knew it was going to be fun. I knew it was going to be exciting. I knew I was going to learn a ton. And I learned even more than I thought I would. I hope we get to chat again soon.
We will, I'm
We'll
sure.
definitely keep emailing. And yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye.